Hola, so good morning. Good morning. As I was bowing to this wonderfully concise, pithy altar here, it just struck me that there's, as far as what I've received from Dharma, that's the whole lineage right there. Buddha Shakyamuni, the root, the base of all of the Dharma teachings of the Buddha. And then His Holiness Dalai Lama, who just so perfectly, I'm just going to speak out of my devotion and faith, but also close observation, so perfectly embodies the monastic ideal. He's a perfect monk. He's a perfect monk. And the Bodhisattva ideal, he's the perfect Bodhisattva. And the Pandit ideal, his knowledge just intimidates me sometimes, and I'm not kidding. Just the breadth of his knowledge of Buddha Dharma, and the way he can draw from sources just at the tip of the tongue, right there, just flowing out unimpededly. I really stand in awe of his sheer erudition, let alone his skill in teaching, and the immense warmth and kindness and compassion he shows, as far as I can tell, at all times, with everyone. So he is a constant source of inspiration for me. And he was looking after me before I even knew it. Because when I met this monk up in Norway, next stop was coming down to the University of Göttingen in West Germany. Had been planning to study philosophy and ecology, that was going to be my whole life. Found that in 1970, ecology hadn't arrived yet, not an academic discipline, and philosophy, it just struck me as so barren, just dry, that it wasn't for me. But just the year before, His Holiness had appointed a Tibetan Lama to serve in the Indology department at that university to teach Tibetan. And I became his only student. And I was center stage, and then he just took me under his wing and just showed me such kindness. And he made the connection for me to go down to Switzerland. And then from Switzerland, they made a connection for me to connect with the Dalai Lama's personal physician. Then he made a connection for me to have an audience with His Holiness. So this flower has been unfolding, but I find in this lifetime, His Holiness has been my Buddha. Didn't see that coming. But it is devotion. That's what it is. And gratitude. Because but for him, I really don't know where I'd be now. I have no idea. But it wouldn't be here. That's one thing I know. So, with great gratitude to all of my lamas, I've trained under, received empowerment and so forth from about 40 in this lifetime, and counting. I just made a new Dharma connection with this marvelous Bhutanese Lama just a couple of weeks ago. I thought I was finished. But then when I learned about him and then met him, I was very happy to take empowerment. He gave an Amitayus empowerment for a long life. The Buddha of everlasting life, one can say. So that's where I'm coming from. To, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this retreat, to not repay the kindness of my gurus. It would be unfortunate. And not repay the kindness of those who supported me to help me be alive for the last 49 years, most of which was without income. Deeply grateful. So that's why I'm teaching like that. So we move now back to our practice, and to highlight again, this is not a shift in different methods as we did for mindfulness of breathing, but as I mentioned yesterday, just to make sure that we're not missing anything. So what's the object? We're attending to the space of the mind, and whatever mental events, not sensory, not visual and so forth, but mental events arise within that domain. So yesterday afternoon, then we looked into a relatively easy, not that easy, but relatively easy, these objective appearances within the domain of the mind, thoughts that you can actually witness, like you're overhearing them, but having no sense at all of thinking them, right? You've experienced thoughts like that. They just come up, well, like that. I don't see a whole lot of heads nodding. And then images coming up. Well, some of the biggest images coming up are, of course, dreams with a soundtrack. And they are simply events arising in the space of the mind. To recognize them as such is to be lucid, which frees you from suffering from anything that might happen in a dream, because after all, it's just a dream. And in exactly the same way, exactly the nature of mental events that arise in the dream, those are exactly the same nature of mental events that arise in the waking state. So if dream events, the people, everything that happens in a dream, if that cannot possibly harm you, if you actually know their nature, it turns out there's an exact parallel. Nothing that arises in the space of the mind in the waking state can possibly harm you if you know their nature. And if you don't, you will confuse them for something they are not. And that is reality, objective reality. Thinking that you're really thinking about something real and thinking at the same time, if you're suffering full-on OCDD, that what's coming to mind where the thinking is the whole truth, nothing but the truth. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And as I said before, I think it's a profound truth. It's never true. That's never true, that it's the whole truth. Sometimes it has zero truth, because it's sheer speculation, with no grounding in anything at all, except for it just came up, and then, well, maybe it's true. After all, it came to my mind. So sometimes it has zero credibility, zero basis in reality. Sometimes it's half and half, 90, 10, 10, 90, and so forth, but never 100%. So this brings us then to an enormously important and easily overlooked aspect of this practice of taking awareness and appearances and awareness as the path, taking the impure mind as the path. That's a good one. As we're taking the breath as the path, taking the impure mind as the path. And make sure that we do not overlook, but in fact give very keen interest to the subjective impulses arising, which again, they sneak up on you. Now here's one, I think, helpful fact. And that is when it comes to these objective appearances, like a discursive thought that just pops up, and you were the cat looking at the mouse hole, so as soon as the mouse poked its nose through the hole, you see it immediately. So there's no notion of the cat thinking, I'm a mouse. It sees the mouse, and it's watching the hole, and there's the nose, and yep, I saw it. As soon as it came up, I saw it. That's being lucid with respect to mice. When the mouse comes up, you see the mouse as a mouse. And so, likewise, you can be, maybe you've already experienced this, not that hard, to be so still and so focused in the right area that as soon as a discursive thought comes up, just pops up, you see it right from its birthing, right from the birth, right from its inception. There's the thought, I didn't do that, it's not mine, I'm witnessing it like I'm witnessing colors in the visual space. So that, what I'm getting at is that you can observe thoughts and mental images in real time. That is, as soon as they arise, you can be there, Johnny on the spot. That is a simultaneity of the objective appearances, thoughts, images, and so forth, and your awareness of them. They can be totally simultaneous. I'm sure of that. But as William James pointed out, the great pioneer of American psychology, he pointed out, he was tremendously gifted in introspection. He had no training, had no spiritual practice, wasn't religious in any particular way, although open and very sympathetic to. But he said whenever a subjective impulse arises, like a desire that has some other referent, an emotion that's about something, a feeling that's about something, or for that matter, he wouldn't say, but the whole range of mental afflictions, anger, craving, hostility, jealousy, envy, and so forth, all of these that have reference, these are subjective impulses. And Buddhist psychology says exactly the same thing. And you cannot be aware of the first moment of, at least as far as I can tell, you can't. I won't be too strong here. But in my experience, I have not been able, there I'm very safe ground, I have not been able to experience the very first instant of subjective impulse. Because when that impulse comes up, it's focusing on something else. The object of desire. If I'm emotional about something, the object about which I'm emoting, and so forth. Or if a mental affliction comes up, I'm irritated at that, craving that, jealous about that, and so forth and so on. So in that first instant, the subjective impulse has something else as its referent and not itself. But in the second instant, and this could be a fraction of a second, you're aware, I see I'm becoming a little bit edgy, a little bit irritable, I'm a little bit impatient, or some craving is arising, or maybe some jealousy is just coming up, or I see that the mind is becoming agitated. I see the mind is becoming a bit dull. But it's always retrospective. It's retrospective. And so William James says this. It's 1,500 years earlier. Buddhist epistemologist was saying this. But in the next instant, and it could be a fraction of a second later, but it might be 3 seconds later, 5 seconds later, it might be a minute later, then we retrospectively become aware of the subjective impulses, right? So it's always a little bit different. But now here there is a complete intersection of some really marvelous very helpful research coming from secular affective psychology, and one of the many blessings of my life is to have become friends with some superb scientists, and one of them is Professor Paul Ekman, who's long since retired but still alive, happy to say. I've gotten to know his daughter, Eve Ekman, very well. We've co-taught a lot. Fine young person. In fact, she and another fellow, her teaching partner, not any other kind of partner, they are now teaching Cultivating Emotional Balance. I've passed it on to the next generation, and I'll be doing more and more of that as I get older. But the point here from Paul Ekman's work and his colleagues, and I'm pointing here an intersection of just great, straight, solid, really sharp science, which is fairly recent, last 30, 40, 50 years. Affective psychology is not a very ancient discipline or subdiscipline, and Buddhism. And that is, I will use Paul Ekman's words because I find them so very relevant to my own experience, and I'm sure to many other people. He spent about 50 years studying emotions, and he's a world expert, also studying lies, and he's a world expert on that as well. The signs of people lying, so he's very, very knowledgeable. And his point that I find so helpful is, emotions arise usually unbidden. We don't say in 3, 2, 1, I'm about to have an emotion. They just come up, they're triggered by something, and usually involuntarily. And then, so there's the experience of emotion. Let's have a nice one. Why don't we have all negative? Generosity, an impulse to be generous. I see here a person really in need. Thank you. Very generous with his horn. It was like a punctuation mark. I like that. Generosity. And he was saying, yeah, go for generosity. Don't always go for irritation. All that kind of stuff. Give them a break once in a while. Generosity is a mental virtue. It is the yearning to offer something, whether it's intangible like Dharma, whether it's friendship, whether it's protection, whether it's material goods. First of the 6 perfections. And so let's imagine that you're seeing someone and you feel, I could really offer something tangible, let's say. Or maybe it's just the person is lonely and you're offering companionship. Maybe they're afraid and you're offering protection. Maybe they're really yearning for Dharma and you actually know some Dharma that you think can help them. These are all acts of generosity. So you see, here's an opportunity where I could engage in an act of generosity. What am I focusing on? That person. And in what way I could be of service to that person by offering something that I have, tangible or intangible. In that first instant of, I would like to be of service to this person, offer this person something that could be of value. In that first instant, the awareness is focused on that person in a particular way. I would like to be of service to this person. So in that first instant, I'm not aware of generosity arising, I'm aware of that. In the second instant, though, before I maybe extend, might I help you in this way, or would you like this, before I say that, that's the action. That is an expression, a pressing out of in this case, it's an aspiration. It's cognitive, in fact. But it could be also, of course, imbued with emotion. If the person is really suffering, and I feel empathy towards this person, maybe it's compassionate giving, and I'm seeing this person's really suffering, but I could help out. So there's an emotion there of empathy, but also the aspiration of compassion, and coupled with that, I could help, I could do something here, I really can. And I'm about to open my mouth and express my compassion, my empathy, my generosity to the other person. Between, in this case it's a desire, but it could be again a feeling related, between that which comes up in the mind as a subjective impulse and prior to the expression, could I, and then you fill in the rest of the sentence, he calls that between the spark and the flame. The spark of the emotion, and I've commented on it because there is no discipline of cognitive psychology, the psychology of desires, motivations, aspirations, goals, intentions. And I've spoken on this topic many times. It's so important. Please, somebody start a subcategory of psychology, focusing on what is so enormously important for our lives. What are our aspirations, our goals, our ideals? What's your life about? What's the purpose of your life? This is all cognitive. And to be intelligent cognitively may be the most important type of intelligence we have. IQ has no direct relationship with happiness. Emotional intelligence does, but I think cognitive is more fundamental. But the word is, most people don't even know the word conation. I didn't until maybe 10 years ago. So whether it's a desire, I've emphasized to Paul, pretty much everything you're saying about emotion, we could say this about conation as well. Desires, aspirations, motivations, they often just come up. Now in meditation, you may cultivate, wisely cultivate renunciation, cultivate bodhicitta, cultivate the four immeasurables. You can cultivate aspirations, but often desires just come up. So whether it's a desire, or whether it's an emotion, which is quite different from a desire, either way, that's the spark. That's what arises in the mind stream. And then often with both, a desire comes up and we express it. Please, may I have some more water? That's an expression of a desire for more water. Or it's an emotion coming up, and it could be an emotion of empathy. It could be an emotion of empathy, of simply expressing one's shared feeling with the other person who's going through a difficult time. I really feel for you. I really feel for you. Like that. So between the spark and the flame, and I gave a really nice one there. Some of the emotions can be potentially very toxic, but he's pointing out this point, in that temporal interval, between the spark of a subjective impulse coming up, such as a desire or an emotion, between that and the time when it's being expressed in the world, through physical behavior, through word, it's enormously important, he argues, that you bring in the meta-awareness of recognizing, in his case, he's talking about emotion, so I'll say emotion now. You recognize the nature of the emotion that's come up before you express it. If you don't, then you'll be aware of that emotion when everybody else is. Because there'll be hardly any lapse at all between the emotion and your expression of it. And we often justify it. Well, I just had to get that off my chest. Or one of my little quips, it's getting very tired, for people have heard it before. But when we tell people, it's a motion that builds up, and we're holding it in, and then finally we say, I have to give you a piece of my mind, As I like to say, always the worst piece. You never say, I have to give you a piece of my mind. I feel a very tender sense of warmth in caring for you. People never say that. Didn't see that coming. Well, thank you. Anything else? But, So, let's go back to emotion. That was so when you see an impulse, the desire of generosity, the emotion of empathy, and it's coming up, and you recognize, here it is, I'm really feeling with this person, I'd really like to be of service, then you see it, it's kind of just seeing green lights all over the place. But even then, is this the time? Is this the type of gift that would be most helpful? There is unwise giving. We all know that. There are unwise giving, or maybe it's not the time. Maybe not the right time. Maybe not the right gift. Maybe something else would be helpful. If, for example, I see a person suffering from some serious psychological problem, and I empathize with this person, and I think, oh, well, I've received a lot of Dharma teachings, could I help you? Maybe that's not the best thing to offer. Rather, I'd like to refer you to this very experienced and compassionate and wise psychotherapist. Because I hope I do believe I have some compassion and wisdom, but I have no training at all as a psychotherapist. So better than maybe I can help you, I think this person might be really able to help you, and maybe that would be my gift. So even that, the fact that your motivation is good, your empathy is sound, doesn't necessarily mean that expression of it will be wise. And so the wisdom has the chance to blossom, to activate in that interval. You didn't choose the emotion or desire in many cases, but before you act, before you express, let there be a wise monitoring to recognize, okay, in this case, motivation good, desire good, feeling good, but, Alan, as much as you'd like to help this person, you don't have the professional capacity. So better give a referral here, or just give affection. That's never the wrong answer, I think, just affection. And how you display it may just be a warm presence, that's non-threatening. And so, between the spark and the flame, well, it's very nice. It means like a very, very soft landing when we're talking about a very wholesome, very beneficial desire or emotion. But if it's irritation, if it's rage, if it's impatient, if it's contempt or disdain, we see somebody displaying contemptible behavior, and then we want to express our contempt for that person. The wisdom here is seeing, okay, now it's contempt, now a nasty one. Contempt, a sense of moral superiority, this person's behavior is contemptible, therefore this person is contemptible. Okay, this is a destructive emotion. this emotion, and to recognize before the expression of contempt comes out, look at this and say, if I express this now, will this be helpful? Will this be helpful? And if not, make a choice. I'm feeling contempt. I didn't ask for it. It just came up. But I'm going to put myself in quarantine now, like Shantideva. I would like to express my contempt because I think this behavior is horrible. But expressing contempt for another person, or even this person's behavior, if this person is not open to what I have to say, there's no reason to say it. You just make that person irritated, or maybe violent, who knows what. So between the spark and the flame, that's the time when you have the possibility of freedom. Freedom to make a wise choice. That's just straight psychology, but really it's Dharma. I mentioned Dharma is not just in religion or in philosophy, that's flat out Dharma in a purely scientific context. So I've learned a lot from Paul Ekman. I could go on and on about other things I've learned over a 20-year friendship. And it's been a very warm, very mutual friendship because I'm drawing on a whole tradition he's much less familiar with. So that being said, another neuropsychiatrist that I know, got to know quite well when I was a graduate student at Stanford, wrote an essay, a scientific paper published in a psychology journal, saying that if one, I'm paraphrasing but very closely, if one is metacognitively impaired, simply doesn't have the ability to monitor one's own desires and thoughts and emotions just as oblivious of them, then this is more debilitating, more harmful to your well-being, to your mental health and well-being, than being blind, deaf, or physically impaired. And I think it's flat out true. So this is something, again, I wish that all children would be taught this. Again, religious, not religious. But developing the ability early on, this metacognitive awareness, to be aware of the desires and thoughts and emotions and so forth before they arise, so you can just check in. Is this worth saying? Is it worth saying in this way? Is it worth saying at this time? And if we all did that, whoa, this world, regardless of anything else, this world would be a very different place. Just anticipating, using our, I'm pointing to my frontal cortex here, the biological substrate of our intelligence. The world would be a much more peaceful place if we are aware of, as Shantideva said, when you're aware that your mind is toxic, the emotions coming up, the desires coming up are really not healthy. As Nagasena said of mindfulness, following the courses of tendencies, recognizing these are beneficial, these are unbeneficial, then do the smart thing, cultivate the beneficial, and release the unbeneficial. So that is integral to this very simple practice we're doing, to be aware of, and not in a judgmental way, but in a discerning way. It's not mea culpa, oh, I shouldn't have that desire, I shouldn't have that emotion, I shouldn't be thinking this. Oh, give it a rest. These thoughts are just happening. These desires are just happening, these emotions just happening. You didn't invite them, so you didn't do it. But they are in your mind stream, and now you've got a big choice. Are you going to identify with them? And if they're toxic, you will then become afflicted. And if you act upon them, now you're getting yourself into trouble. Which, what does he say, that wonderful phrasing, Paul Ekman? Ah, yes, I love it. And I think I can anticipate your response. He said, if we fail to do that, and our emotions just go out and get expressed in the world without any monitoring, without any wisdom, deciding this is worth expressing and this is not worth expressing, or this is not worth expressing now in this way. This is emotional intelligence. He said, if we fail to do that, and then we just let our desires and emotions gush out unimpededly, no monitoring, no wisdom, he said, and are you ready? This leads to regrettable episodes. People always laugh. I'm not quite sure why, but I kind of get it. But it's so non-moralistic. It's so non-moralistic. It's like, oh, geez, why did I say that? And now I can't go, I can't suck it back in. It's out there in the world now. And I can't get it back in, and I can apologize, but still, apologizing would have been better not to do it in the first place. What was I thinking? The answer is you weren't. You weren't thinking. You didn't exercise any choice. You were lacking in metacognitive awareness and metacognitive intelligence, recognizing this is wholesome. Express it, no problem. This is not wholesome. This will not give you what you want. It's not going to give anybody else what they want. Why don't you just put a cork in it? And if you want to call that suppression, go for it. Suppress. Sometimes it's better to suppress than express. Just like if you have swine flu, it's better not to sneeze. Much better than welcome, I want to share what I have. I have to get it off my chest. I have to get something off my mind. So there we are. That's the second aspect of this. To make sure that you're taking your own mind as the path is helping you exercise this invaluable skill that doesn't come naturally, but you can cultivate it, and you can become wiser and wiser and wiser in terms of which desires to embrace, which emotions to express, and so forth. If you could either have that or $1 billion, I say don't hesitate for a moment. $1 billion will not make you 1 billion times happier. Probably no happier at all. Because suddenly you have all these friends you didn't know you had. And they all they're so friendly to you. If somebody wanted to give me $1 billion, I say, great, give it to the Contemplative Observatory in Tuscany. But what would I do with $1 million? I have no idea. I don't want it. But sure, yeah, I'll take it, and then tax write-off immediately off to the retreat center. When I think of money, I think of money like 100 million, billion, and so forth. I think of how many retreat centers would that make? That's what money really means to me. The United States, the National Institute of Mental Health recently spent $13 billion on some research that was completely materialistic and reductionistic in terms of understanding mental disease, and it was completely wasted. 13 billion. Can you imagine how many retreat centers that is? Oh. So there we are. So that's where we're going. This is not a new method. This is to make sure that as you're resting in that stillness, you're aware of the movements of the mind that are arising objectively, which you can see in real time, and you're aware of the subjective impulses arising, of which you can be aware very quickly, but always retrospectively. And then, just in this case, you're not expressing anything at all, because you're just sitting there quietly, and discerningly recognizing the subjective states coming up, the objective appearances coming up, and resting in the stillness of your awareness. So let's do it, shall we? To ensure that your meditation, your practice is as meaningful as possible, arouse the most meaningful motivation with which your practice will be imbued, even though you're not consciously thinking about it for the rest of the session. If you're following the Bodhisattva way of life, then of course there is one answer. What more meaningful motivation could there be than to aspire for perfection? To not place any artificial limit or boundary or ceiling on the extent of compassion that you may realize, the wisdom you may realize, the creative power of your consciousness you could realize for the benefit of all, the greatest freedom to aspire for perfect awakening in order to be of greatest possible service to the world from now until all sentient beings are free. If you wish, then with such a motivation, settle your body, speech, and mind in the natural states. Then with your eyes gently open, softly open, all the muscles around the eyes relaxed and soft, an openness between your eyebrows, a spaciousness in the forehead. Let your gaze be vacant. Continue to rest your awareness right where it is, again like a king or a queen sitting upon the royal throne, and greeting everyone who comes into the audience hall, whoever they may be, greeting them all, face to face with them all, but not moving backwards or forwards, not being carried away. Face to face with your mind as you focus the light of your awareness single-pointedly on the space of the mind, noting the objective appearances, thoughts, and images arising and passing, while at the same time being aware of the stillness and the cognizance of your own awareness. Filling out the practice, observing not only the thoughts and images, the objective appearances, but with a deep core sense of looseness and relaxation, resting in the utter simplicity of awareness that is more primal than your human mind. Clearly, just logically, if anything of an individual carries on from lifetime to lifetime, it won't be the human mind that arises independent upon the human brain, because that didn't exist before you were conceived, and it is just fertilizer after you've died. So the human mind cannot carry on, if anything carries on. Sheer logic here. If anything aspect of your being carries on, beyond the portals of death, it will be simple, unadorned, unconfigured consciousness. Rest there. So loose, so relaxed. Whenever any kind of movements of the mind arise, emotions, feelings, dullness, agitation, interest, boredom, you're so relaxed that you quickly, retrospectively, note the occurrences of these states of mind, these subjective impulses. And as with the thoughts, the images, you simply observe their nature. Boredom has arisen. I observe agitation. Desire for something has arisen. Without thinking it, you can know it already. Rest in that stillness, observing the objective appearances and subjective states and impulses of the mind. And let them be, arising of their own accord and dissolving of their own accord. Do introspectively check in now and then to see that your breath is flowing effortlessly, unimpededly. When we really concentrate, especially in a challenging task, it's very easy for that concentration itself to entail contraction, developing stability while losing relaxation, and insofar as there's a clamping down, a tightening, this is bound to restrict the effortless, unimpeded flow of your respiration. So see that it does not do so. Again, relaxing from the core, deeper and deeper. We have a very deeply ingrained habit, of course, for the attention to be carried away, abducted by appearances, thoughts, images, sensory appearances. And we have an equally deeply ingrained tendency to identify with whatever comes up in the mind. I'm bored. I'm agitated. I am unhappy. I am happy. I. Total fusion of our identity. Confusion, fusing together of our identity with some subjective impulse, which is not a person, which is not anyone at all. So it'll take some perseverance and a deepening sense of relaxation to be aware of the appearances and not be distracted, aware of the subjective impulses and not identify with them. To develop that skill, monitor the flow of mindfulness with introspection. And as soon as excitation, that movement is set in, relax, just loosen up, maybe that's enough. And if the quality for mindfulness begins to dim, arouse, maybe that'll be enough. Let's continue practicing now in silence. also. I must say what I find remarkable about this Pith instruction that goes on for less than 1 page and is complete is that I've read presentations of this practice that go back 1,000 years, 90 years, contemporary. It's the same practice. Same practice. And I found a very strong corollary in, I think it was the Greek Orthodox contemplative tradition, something very, very similar. So this, I believe, is really quite timeless. And of course, one reason I'm very especially happy to teach this wherever I go, I've taught this in Mongolia, in Singapore, in India, etc., that this is completely transcultural. There's nothing Tibetan about this or Indian about this, and frankly, it's hard to see which part of it is Buddhist, even though it's a core Buddhist practice. So that's why I really especially love sharing this type of practice, because it's potentially beneficial to everyone. So he's given us the Pith instructions, and that is sustain your mindfulness without distraction, without grasping, and then telling us how to develop this over time in terms of duration, pointing out some problems, challenges that may arise along the way, all of this very, very concise. And then he begins to tell us, well, what can you anticipate might flow out of this practice? So we go into, on page 10 here, the third full paragraph, he says, by settling the mind in its natural state, sensations of bliss may arise. Just observing the mind, and then just like a geyser, or it's called an upheaval, a surge, a bliss will come up. And once again, very clearly, he's not referring to having a happy thought or a beautiful image coming up and responding to that, oh, that's nice. No, it's coming up from the subjective side without any pleasant catalyst or stimulus in the space of the mind. If some happiness comes up because you had a happy thought or a beautiful image, that's just more hedonia. So that's one thing that might come up. That sounds nice. So sensations of bliss may arise. They could also occur in the body. I've been teaching a lot, listening a lot. Sometimes people will be doing this or mindfulness of breathing, and bliss surges up in the body somatically. That can happen too. So sensations of bliss may arise. So here he says, such as pleasant physical and mental sensations. You may have experiences of luminosity. Just suddenly, everything is so clear, so sharp, so high definition. That can come up like a spike, and then gradually, like fireworks, coming up, illuminating, and then gradually settling back into the norm. So you may have experiences of luminosity, such as the clarity of consciousness. Clarity of consciousness. And you may have experiences of non-conceptuality, of just a deep calm that just slips in for just sometimes seconds, could be even longer, just a deep silence, really, really peaceful, quiet. And that can be what surges up, is quiet and silence. Such as, so you may have experiences of non-conceptuality, such as the appearance of empty form, or appearances, maybe that should be plural, such as the appearances of empty form, probably a little bit better, because in Tibetan, by and large, you can't tell whether a noun is singular or plural. You have to get it by context. You know? Never in English, almost never. But so I think probably a better, because it could be a lot of appearances, empty forms. Now what's he referring to here? He's not saying you'll realize emptiness, not likely. But empty forms, this is, again, very packed with insight, drawing from centuries and centuries of contemplative experience. Empty forms. Well, in our normal day-to-day experience with no mental training at all, we're doing just the opposite of what the Buddha counseled to Bahia, in the scene, let be just a scene, and so forth and so on. And that is when we see something, I see Ben's black sweater and his torso, all I'm getting visually is appearances. I mean, just colors and shapes, right? Colors. Eyes don't give anything more than colors and shapes. But when I'm looking, of course, I see that's probably a cotton shirt. And if I should touch your shoulder, probably pretty firm there. If I touch your arm, probably a little bit softer, and so forth. But I'm seeing your clothed torso, and I'm seeing you as, very solidly there. Solidly there. Just I'm seeing the clothing on a solid person. Like if I go like that, I'm going to hit something. And so I'm drawing on experience of having seen many people in a lot of shirts. And if I stroked your shirt on your arm, I know exactly what I'd feel. No surprises there. So I'm saying, I can tell that's quite a soft shirt. I can tell, from even this distance. So I'm seeing he's wearing a soft shirt and et cetera, et cetera. But this is all drawing from memory and being superimposed. That color is the color of his shirt, worn by a man, right? And I hear a sound, I immediately think, oh, that's sound of traffic. That's the sound of ventilation or what have you. And then we see people. We see appearances. Here's a person here. What I'm seeing, again, is just colors and shapes. But when I'm looking at you, I'm not just seeing colors and shapes. I'm seeing a person. I have some sense. You're more than 50 and less than 100. You know, I'm bracketing rather generously there, being very safe. Did I dodge the bullet? Okay, 40. Let's say 40. No younger than 40 and definitely not over 100. But I'm seeing a lot more, that is, I'm aware of, mentally aware of a lot more than I'm looking to see, and I'm seeing, oh yeah, I saw some colors and shapes there. And so we're superimposing, and if I touched your kneecap, I'm sure it'd be very hard, just like Ben's. So I'm seeing something that's quite solid. Your hand's resting on it, it's not squishing down into it. So I'm seeing a lot of things that are layered over based on memory and so forth. And so we're looking around and we're seeing a whole bunch of who can look at that chunky stuff? Who can look at that wall and not see something solid? I mean, how can you even do that? Yeah, if you really practice in the scene, let there be just a scene. So this is how we're normally operating. And if one is let's say, brain scientist, and professionally 8, 10, 12 hours a day, you're looking at brains, then you may very well think, well, of course, everything mental is a function of what I'm looking at. You know, that would be not a crazy idea or just metaphysical excursion. I mean, you're seeing the correlations, brain and subjective experience. And so the point here is that for the moment, what we attend to is reality, William James. And so if you're attending to things and just normally superimposing solidity and fluidity, and that's the sound of Ben, and that's the, I won't say the smell of Ben because I don't know what your smell is like, but you know, not just the smell, it's the smell of something. That's the smell of incense, it's the smell of mold, whatever it may be. We're always doing that, and in so doing we make sense of our world. But everything's imbued with everything else, right? But now when you're practicing, doing this practice, and in the mentally cognized, you're observing just the mentally cognized, and you're doing that for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and you're not superimposing, you're not reifying, grasping to the true existence of the thoughts, images, and desires, and so forth. You're resting in that stillness and just being aware of them. Then you're continuing to see mental events that are devoid of substantiality, have no substance, nothing chunky. There's nothing really there. You're seeing them for what they are. They're just appearances arising in the space of the mind. And so there's nothing behind them. In a non-lucid dream, you think there is something behind them, and that's why you can suffer in a dream. If you're lucid, all the appearances in the dream you see, there's nothing behind them. They're empty appearances, so therefore a big guy with a knife can't harm you because there's no knife, and there's no belly, and so forth. Imagine doing this for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and then when you come out of meditation, and you come into a room, you're walking along the street, where are all of these appearances arising, these visual appearances? Where are they? Are these the color of the wall, that kind of looks like a pale green? Clearly up there, there's a nice pale green up in the higher part. It really looks like the green is a quality of the wall way up there. But any physicist or neuroscientist will tell you that's just not true. That's naive realism, because there's no green up there. There are molecules emitting photons of certain frequencies, which when they strike through your retina and catalyze a complex sequence of electrochemical events culminating in the visual cortex, then you get to see green. But the green isn't out there. Ask any scientist. The green isn't out there. There are molecules out there, there are photons out there, but green isn't out there. But it looks like it. So where is green? Where is green? Where is red? Where is beige or beige? Where are those colors that we see? Philosophers call them qualia. The immediate contents of visual experience. Colors, for example. The immediate contents of auditory experience, the sound. Where is the sound? Sound waves travel at what? About 750 miles an hour, something like that? Sound waves travel whether you're listening to them or not. But the sound that you hear, of course, doesn't travel through space. It's generated independence upon your auditory cortices. And likewise, smells are not in the air, the taste is not in the food, and the tactile sensations are not really in the nerve endings in your body. So these are all qualia. These are all qualia, the immediate contents of sensory experience. And where are they located? Where are these qualia located? Let's just take the gray color of your sweatshirt, like here. Yeah? Where's your sweatshirt's over there? It's about 4 and 5 meters away from my eyes. Clear, yeah? gray sweatshirt. And so the sweatshirt's over there, of course it is, no question. And if I blink, it's still there. Of course, it has nothing to do whether you're looking at it or not. But the gray that I see isn't there in the sweatshirt. It's not. There are no gray molecules. There are no gray photons. And I'm going to have to go away from gray for a reason. Your red blouse, you'll see why I'm going to move away from gray. Your red blouse, same thing. There's no red molecules, there's no red photons. And in my visual cortex, there are no red neurons. There are no red neurons that turn red. That's why I wanted to avoid gray matter. I set myself a trap there. So there's gray matter, but it's not really gray. Do you think anything's really gray inside your head? Do you really think so? It's dark in there. There's no gray matter inside. When nobody's looking, do you really think there's something gray inside your head? It's a meaningful way of speaking, but it's just what neuroscientists see when they look at that part of the brain which is exposed to light. So, but red is safe. No part of my visual cortex turns red. So the red isn't in the molecules of your blouse. It's not. There are no red photons. I know that for sure. And none of the neurons, dendrites, synapse, or let alone glial cells turn red. So where is red? To say it doesn't exist is just flat out silly. And there's some extreme materialists will go that route, but I find it too silly to even to refute. If that's what you think, I have nothing to tell you. So where's the red? And the red doesn't exist in physical space. That should be as obvious as the nose on your face. It's not in the molecules, it's not in the photons, it's not inside the head, not anywhere else. So where is red? Where are sounds? Where are smells, taste, and so forth? They're in the space of awareness. Where is the space of awareness? Space of awareness is not physical, so it's not located in physical space. It's like asking, where are prime numbers? Where are even integers? Where are they? They exist for sure. Prime numbers, they exist. Every mathematician knows they exist. Where do they exist? If they exist, where do they exist? Well, not in physical space, that's for sure. Where do they exist? In the space of awareness. Where do qualia exist? In space of awareness. Meaningful information. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. That was a statement that has meaning. Where's the meaning? Where's the meaning of that statement? Inside your neurons? Give me a break. And so we're getting to the point here very quickly now, and that is all these appearances in the daytime. None of them are really substantially real. They're all just appearances in the space of awareness. But where are dreams? Where do the dream imagery, where do they exist? In the space of awareness. Where are your thoughts and emotions? In the space of awareness. So as Stephen LeBears, an old friend of mine who's a world expert in lucid dreaming, he said the difference between dreaming and awaking and being in the waking state is that when you're dreaming, you're experiencing appearances without physical constraints. That is, you don't need any photons or sound waves coming in to help configure the contents of your dream without physical constraints. But dreaming is having, well, he actually said it the other way, it's easier. Waking experience right now is dreaming with physical constraints. That if I suddenly decided I'd like Ben to turn into a big, giant, 6-foot rabbit. What's his name? Harvey, yes. I liked Harvey. And I thought it would be much more interesting to have Harvey here than Ben. I'm sure you're a nice guy, but Harvey, wouldn't he be cool? A 6-foot rabbit? That would be very entertaining. And so, but I can't turn him into Harvey because there are objective constraints. But if I were dreaming and I were lucid dreaming, there'd be no problem. I would just go click, click, and there's Harvey. You know? So there are no physical constraints in a dream. That is, when you're lucid, you can do with it what you will. But I can't do with Ben what I will. I can't turn him into a rabbit or anything at all. There he is. There are physical constraints. Waking experience is dreaming with physical constraints. Dreaming is waking without physical constraints. But all of the appearances of the dream and all the appearances in the waking state are all equally occurring in the space of the mind. And when you see that, you've just come off your cushion having spent 10 hours observing mental events. You'll look around and say, but all these appearances are also in the space of the mind, and they're just as empty as anything else. And you know perfectly well that doesn't mean you can step in front of a speeding car and just say, appearances, empty appearances. You can for a little while. You'll say, empty appearances, empty appearances, empty. And then you'll have a whole different set of appearances. You'll be in the bardo. So there we go. That's what empty forms is. You're seeing appearances, doing exactly what the Buddha said. In the scene, let it be just the scene. Don't superimpose all the other stuff. And the hearing, just see that Forms are just forms. And if we jump up into the Mahayana, Zuk tomba on tomba ni zuk so, zuk le tomba ni jema yin, tomba ni le kyan, zuk jema yin, no. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Apart from form, there is no emptiness. Apart from emptiness, there is no form. So then we go really deep, really quickly. But the form is empty of anything substantial and inherently existing from its own side. All forms are empty. They're empty forms. And you get a glimmering of it just by doing this practice. So this practice actually brings with it a lot of insights, even though it's not specifically a Vipassana practice. But ask any kind of modern Vipassana practitioner, where they'll define Vipassana, insight meditation, as mindfulness, which is actually completely mistaken, and then define mindfulness as simply bare attention, which is completely mistaken. Then they would say, if introduced to this practice, they would say, well, this is Vipassana, because you're applying bare attention to the mind. Well, you are, but sorry, it's not Vipassana, it's Shamatha. So that took a little bit of commentary, but it's something pretty cool that you actually see without getting into Madhyamaka philosophy or perfection of wisdom. You start to actually see the dreamlike nature of waking reality. But it does say dreamlike because you know perfectly well, if you step in front of a car in a lucid dream, it may go right through you. Step in front of a car during the waking state and it won't. So dreams and waking are not the same, but they're actually much more similar than one might think at first glance. And this practice leads you right to that insight. So you may have an experience of appearances of empty forms, and then the next one is the most interesting one to my mind. You may also have experiences of non-conceptuality. Wait a minute. As well as, you may have as well a non-conceptual sense that nothing can harm your mind, regardless of whether or not thoughts have ceased. I find that the most interesting of all the sentences or assertions in this discussion. The phrasing, as usual, is precise. So as you're resting in there in the stillness of your awareness, you may have this certainty, a non-conceptual certainty, that whatever comes up in the mind, including emotions and desires, memories and images and fantasies, that whatever comes up, even mental afflictions themselves, as you're resting in that non-conceptual stillness of clear, cognizant awareness, you may see that whatever's coming up, they have no power from their own side to harm you. And you know that non-conceptually. You just know that immediately, regardless of whether or not thoughts have ceased. So thoughts keep on coming up, but your awareness is not conceptual because you're not identifying with the thoughts. You're not thinking the thoughts. You're non-conceptually observing the thoughts. You're non-conceptually observing concepts. This is really, to my mind, really, really brilliant. And then he continues, now, whatever kinds of experiences and visions arise, whatever comes up, be they gentle or violent, subtle or gross, of long or short duration, strong or weak, good or bad, sinful or virtuous, whatever you like, but in other words, the whole array of mental events, what do you do when any of these kind of events come up? Any without exception. You have only one response: observe their nature. Observe their nature. If it's a thought, let's say, about your mother, that's a thought. When that thought of your mother comes up, maybe there's an image there, maybe it's some affectionate memory of engaging with your mother. When that thought comes up, you just observe that thought as a thought, which is arising in the space of your mind right now, and you don't go off to attend to your mother. You're not looking at the referent of the thought, you're looking at the very nature of the thought, and the nature of the thought, it's a mental event arising in the space of my mind, and that thought is not my mother. It's simple. But if you saw that, you wouldn't be tortured by your thoughts anymore. So this is a skill worth cultivating. So, observe their nature, which means don't go off to their referent, and avoid any obsessive evaluation of them as being one thing or not another. So this is being non-judgmental. It's being discerning, intelligent, recognizing wholesome from unwholesome, but obsessive evaluation. Why am I thinking this? You don't try to psychoanalyze yourself, not in this practice. That can be valuable with a psychoanalyst. But here, you're doing something quite extraordinary in the sense of not doing almost everything else. He comes to the gist now. Let the heart of your practice be consciousness. naturally at rest. There's that sovereign sitting upon the throne, lucid and clear. That's the essence. So he's emphasizing here, my finger goes up, this is one of my mudras, but I usually the right one, this is my mudra. It's innocent, isn't it? I don't think this symbolizes anything in the West that I know of. In any case, this is my mudra. It's the mudra of an unflickering candle flame. It's the symbol of your awareness being straight and clear, unwavering, unflickering. You're resting in consciousness, lucid and clear, naturally at rest. Why naturally? Because you're not making it rest, you're releasing all the grasping and distraction that would set it in motion. And this is primary. You're primarily resting right there, but you are aware of these gentle and violent, subtle and gross and so forth, thoughts, emotions, desires and so forth. You're aware of them, but you're not moved by them. So it's stillness in the face of movement. That's the core, that's the heart of your practice. And then he adds here, acting as your own mentor. That is, if you're following the guided meditations, I'm acting as your mentor. I'm guiding you, doing my best. And then after this retreat's over, I think next month there will be recordings. If you want to listen to the guided meditations again, or anybody else does, it's in the public domain as far as I'm concerned. I don't know in any of this. Then when you're on your own, then you're acting as your own mentor. Only you know how is the mind operating right now, what's the quality of mindfulness, and so forth and so on. So take responsibility, you're in charge, you're in the pilot seat, there's no co-pilot, you're on your own, acting as your own mentor. If you can bring the crucial points to perfection, as if you were threading a needle, it's a very, very nice analogy, because to thread a needle doesn't require a lot of effort, but it does require a lot of precision. I'm sure I couldn't do it without my eyeglasses on. I just see a blurry, I couldn't do it. And so it needs some effort, but very subtle effort. You have a big bicep, not going to help you thread that needle at all. It takes some effort, but very subtle, and that's exactly the nature of this practice. This is not getting muscular and okay mind, as he said, for people who have minds like that, the best thing is just to observe the thoughts. Well, that takes some effort, but just very little, very little. And so, as if you're threading a needle, what will happen? So now what potential benefits can you anticipate if you develop and cultivate shamatha with this method? The afflictions of your own mind stream will be subdued. Afflictions are referring to kleshas. Kleshas in general, but very specifically, the 5 obscurations, they'll be subdued. They'll not be eradicated, but you will disempower them, and they may even go dormant. Tsongkhapa says, I think I quote him later, Tsongkhapa says, once you've achieved shamatha, you're not free of any mental affliction, but when you're out and about in the world, the mental afflictions to which you're generally prone, he said 2 things, they will arise far less frequently, and when they do, with far less power. That's a tremendous boon. And that's just shamatha. You haven't even started bodhicitta or really gotten full bodhicitta yet or vipassana. So the benefits of shamatha alone should not be underestimated. That's quite big right there. So the afflictions of your mind stream will be subdued, not eradicated, but subdued enough so that when you move into vipassana, you can really eradicate them. But they'll be subdued, but moreover, you'll gain the autonomy of not succumbing to them. Because you've been practicing for hundreds or thousands of hours, and so when a mental affliction comes up, you recognize it quickly, and then you don't get caught in its grip. You see it, you remain like a piece of wood, and then it dissolves of its own accord. So as a result of that, your mind will constantly be calm and composed. In other words, you'll be resoundingly mentally healthy. You have really done what needed to be done. And the second higher training, the higher training of samadhi, which is designed not just to develop single-pointed attention, as I've said several times, but to develop an exceptional degree of inner calm, of composure, bolstering your psychological immune system, and discovering for yourself that your own mind can, in fact, be a wellspring of genuine well-being, of eudaimonia. Now, such exceptional mental health, extraordinary sanity, free of being in debt, sick, in bonds, enslaved, and lost on a desert track, free of all of that, This is a sound basis for the arising of all samadhis of the stage of generation and completion. He just went into Vajrayana, highest yoga tantra. These are the two stages which you come to the completion of the stage of completion. You're a Buddha. But can you bring a mind that is strongly prone to the five obscurations, that's still heavily dominated by mental afflictions, that flops back and forth like that fish on dry sand, flops back and forth between laxity and dullness, goes into anxiety and uncertainty, and then off to lust and then into ill will. Can you take that mind and effectively practice Vajrayana? You can pretend to, but any notion of actually achieving anything in Vajrayana is a pipe dream. He just said this is the basis. Exceptional sanity is the basis for vipassana, let alone Vajrayana practice. That's a pretty important statement. And then finally we go back to a nice metaphor. Buddhists used a lot of metaphors. This is like tilling the soil of a field. Come back to the cultivator. Cultivation, meditation is cultivating, and the field is your own mind. So your mind that can be so toxic, give rise to so many toxic weeds and poisons and brambles and thorns and so forth that can torment us, prevent us from getting a good night's sleep, prevent us from having an open heart, prevent us from being intelligent. And finally, tilling that, pulling the weeds out, tilling the soil, mulching the soil, sowing good seeds. Then your own mind can provide you a bountiful harvest every time you wake up in the morning. Shamatha. So, from the outset, avoid making a lot of great, exalted, pointless proclamations. Just give it a rest. Back to Bob Newhart. Stop. Rather, it is crucial to do all you can to refine your mind and establish a foundation for contemplative practice. And so I love to say, because I passionately believe it, Shamatha is the servant of all other kinds of meditation. It will serve you well for whether it's reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, whether it's doing the Jesus prayer, whether it's stage regeneration, whether it's Mahamudra or Poa or Tumo, anything else. You're bringing a serviceable mind, which means you may actually be able to take the other practice to its culmination. But if you haven't, as it said classically in Buddhism, there's understanding or wisdom arising from hearing, from thinking, and the wisdom that arises from meditation. And there is no such thing as, this is classical Buddhism, there is no such thing as wisdom arising from meditation unless you've achieved shamatha. Big statement. Big statement. You get a lot of insights, a lot of benefit, no doubt. And I want to emphasize this point. Someone recently asked, when should one practice vipassana? And my answer to that has always been my answer. I'm relaying the answer from my lamas for more than 40 years. It's never too soon to begin practicing vipassana. Never too soon. If you haven't started, you can start today. Start today, absolutely. Gaining insight in the nature of your body, your mind, feelings, mental events. Why should we ever delay that? So vipassana, start immediately. How about bodhicitta? When should I start that? If you're drawn to it, why not start right now? And for that matter, if you have a sound understanding and practice of the Bodhisattva yana, of Mahayana, and a great Lama like Chögyam Rinpoche, who I think granted empowerment in this room, if you encounter a Lama like that, he was stellar. I never met him, but I know a fair amount about him. He was a holy man. He was a holy man. And so if you have the encounter, to encounter a holy man, holy woman is always gender neutral. And you're open to, you're well prepared to receive an empowerment, then go for it. And if the Lama gives you instruction on the sadhana, go for it. I was very hesitant myself during the early stages, during the early 70s, when I was seeing the enormity of Buddha Dharma. And the more I understood it, of Lam Rim, the basic stages, which we'll discuss day after tomorrow night, I will. I was just overwhelmed by the enormity of the richness and the vastness of the first turning of Dharma, the Four Noble Truths and so forth, the four applications of mindfulness, and then ultimate bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta, 6 perfections, teachings on Buddha nature. I thought, oh my goodness, this will keep me busy for a long time. And I thought, I'm absolutely not ready to receive empowerment, Vajrayana empowerment. I'm still wearing diapers here. I'm a baby. And I went down and spoke with my primary teacher, Geshe Ngawang Taige, who was training with 6 days a week. And they just commented, boy, I really clearly do not, because empowerment's more be given on a regular basis by His Holiness, His tutors, other great lamas, and I didn't go to any of them. I thought, no, why would I do that, And I remember speaking with Geshe Ngao and Taige and saying, there's just so much for me to do before even thinking about receiving Vajrayana empowerment, let alone the highest yoga Vajrayana empowerment, like I'm sure Chitin Rinpoche gave right here. And I told him that, and he said, very good. All right, I think you should receive one of those empowerments very soon. You should go to the Dalai Lama and ask him to give you empowerment. Wow, I didn't see that coming. And I know him, and I know myself. He wasn't saying, oh, Alan, you in fact have far greater realizations than you imagine. He wasn't saying that. He wasn't saying that. It wasn't true. He was saying, if you have faith and an authentic Lama, and in this lifetime you have motivation, pure motivation, and enough understanding that the Vajrayana practice is meaningful, and you have the opportunity to receive empowerment from a holy being like Chögyam Rinpoche, let alone His Holiness and so many others, if you have opportunity, don't pass it up. Because even if you don't see any tangible benefits in this lifetime, the connection with such a Lama and receiving empowerments, the imprints from that will serve you very, very well. Think big time. Think beyond this lifetime. Don't have a tiny mind that thinks you're finished when you're dead. Think big. I said, okay, Lama. So I did. Knowing, okay, the little kid in diapers is going for a Vajrayana empowerment. He's sitting in on a postgraduate lecture on quantum cosmology. But at least I get some imprints. So it's never too soon. If you have the faith, you have motivation, you have a foundation, some understanding of emptiness, it's not too soon for Vajrayana. Not too soon for Mahamudra. It's not too soon for Dzogchen. Not too soon. But always bear in mind you're still wearing diapers. If you're like me, maybe you're much more advanced. It's certainly possible. I'm just speaking first person. I've been practicing 49 years. I just have very old diapers. And they've gotten bigger as I've gotten older. It's been very nice. But they're still diapers. I wish I were being humble. But I'm just being candid. But again, I'm a happy tortoise. So there we are. One final point. It's enormously important. He's told us, and it's uniform, when doing this practice, he said it. Evil thoughts, virtuous thoughts, gentle, subtle, coarse, long, short, pleasant, unpleasant, you name it, whatever comes up, just be present with it. Sustain that stillness, whether it's a hurricane of tumultuous, toxic, afflictive thoughts coming up, or it's a bouquet of rainbows of beautiful thoughts coming up. Whatever it is, resting in that stillness and simply observing. What one sees over time is that as you're observing old, afflictive emotions, toxic emotions, desires, mental afflictions arising, if you can hold your own ground, and some old memory, maybe it was a memory of a traumatic event. And again, I'm not giving psychotherapeutical advice. I'm incompetent to do that. But as a meditator and meditation teacher, okay, some experience. Some memory comes up that was very troubling, a memory of a very troubling event, maybe traumatic event, comes up, and you're just able to do that practice, see it come up, and then release itself. What you're watching, especially this is evident if you go into full-time professional training, continuous, under skillful guidance with good companions in a conducive environment, as the weeks and months go by, what you will observe is your mind healing without having to apply antidotes. For anger, you don't necessarily have to apply loving kindness or patience and so forth. These are good, very good. But in this practice, you're not bringing in antidotes. You're just resting in that stillness, and you're watching that there's something in the very nature of your awareness when it is resting in this way that enables the mind to heal itself. You're seeing that happen. And as the mind becomes less and less encumbered by mental afflictions, then you may very well find that compassion, empathy, warmth, kindness, patience, equanimity, composure, calm are rising more and more. And you're watching your mind heal to the point that you get a clean bill of health. You've settled your mind in its natural state. And all of those 5 obscurations and a lot of their derivatives have all gone dormant. So it brings back this issue, so important to understanding what it is to be human, what it is to have a human mind, to be conscious in this universe. So I'm going very deep, very fast here. But we've seen, and the Buddha referred to it, and it's been corroborated thousands of times, that when you simply attend to the breathing in that way, this sorts out, balances, unblocks the many constrictions, blockages, and so forth in your prana system, your nervous system, so that your body, when your chief shamatha is buoyant, it's light, the energies flow smoothly, and the mind that arises in dependence upon the body and the prana within the body is light and buoyant, very healthy, supple, ready to do what you wish it to do. And that's taking the breath as a path. It heals the whole system by way of the prana system. It's natural pranayama. And in this practice, we're not deliberately attending to the breath at all, but by attending to the mind in that same way, not controlling, not trying to improve, not fixing it, not blocking it, not perpetuating it, just being present with it, then we find, wow, these afflictions, these toxic memories, desires, fantasies, and so forth, they're coming up, and I'm just facing them mindfully, and then I'm watching them release themselves. And then over time, fewer and fewer are coming up, that is, less and less frequently, and when they do come up, they come up with less power, and less frequently, as your mind is settling in its natural state, and that's a natural state of balance and health. So I think we may have been underestimating, we in the modern world, massively underestimating the extent to which the mind can heal itself of the inner sources of our troubles, our distress, our unhappiness, and the many tortuous afflictions of the mind. We underestimate the capacity of the mind to heal itself, or the mind to be healed by awareness. And then we can ask, why would awareness heal the mind? Why would that take place? It does. This is not something that if you try it, maybe it will work. This has been tried for at least 1,000 years. The data bank is enormous. Why would bringing that kind of awareness to the mind enable the mind to heal? And I'm going to jump right into Mahayana, into Mahamudra and Dzogchen, because the awareness that you're experiencing when you rest right there in that stillness, that is the outermost display, the effulgence, the face of your own pristine awareness, Buddha nature, Buddha mind. And that's your ultimate ground. This is not other than Buddha mind, not other than pristine awareness, primordial consciousness. It's the face of it that you can see for now. And if you're resting right there, resting in the upper edge, can't find a better way of saying it, the evident expression of, the evident manifestation of your own pristine awareness, then some really deep insight may come. Maybe it is this pristine awareness, this divine awareness, this transcendent awareness, this sacred awareness of pristine awareness, maybe this is the source of all healing. Not only of the mind, maybe this is why the body heals, from abrasions, from broken bones and so forth. Or maybe the ultimate source of healing is not just natural forces within, maybe it is precisely this. And so then the question comes up, what can I do from now on to stop preventing that extraordinary healing power from completely saturating my whole being and healing myself all the way to perfect awakening? So that's your birthright. If you don't have it, nobody can give it to you. But you're a sentient being, you're in. Every sentient being, not only every human being, all sentient beings are imbued with this Buddha nature. That's a Buddhist view. So why not put it to the test? This practice is simple. It's so profound. But it's not profound because the technique is profound. The technique is simple. It's profound because the awareness that you're manifesting and sustaining is infinitely profound. That's where the profundity comes from. So, that's that. So let's take a break and come back at 5 minutes till the hour.